In the first color lecture, I talked about the two color spaces we work with, the additive color space, that's color projected at you by light, so from your computer monitors or your phones, and then the subtractive color space, that's color made from pigments. And when we talk about that, we have to talk about color and printing. And especially when we're talking about packaging design, almost all packaging is printed. And so there are things you have to understand when you start working with color. Now, the biggest concern that a lot of designers come up with, you'll have a design, it looks wonderful on your screen, you love it, you love your colors, and then you go to print it out and you realize the color isn't exactly the way it appears on the screen. And we'll talk about some of the limitations of working with traditional printing. But as I mentioned, even though a lot of the design we encounter today is destined or originates in a digital space, when we're talking about packaging, you're really talking about things that are physically printed, something tactile that you can actually hold on to. So our printing process has remained pretty much the same for over 100 years. To print the widest range of color, a system was developed in the 1880s where obviously if you're on a print in a print shop, you can't have hundreds of different colored inks to try and get a full range of color. And so this system was developed to try and get the widest range of color using the fewest number of colors. And what was discovered is by taking these four colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and combining them through these dot patterns, it will optically create a huge range of colors. So you can get a major spectrum of color using only these four process colors. So here they are, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. People always ask, why do we use K for black? A couple reasons for that. One was so if you used a B, it might be confused with blue. But the main reason is in printing, the black plate is considered the key plate, and that's usually the one plate that you align all the other plates to. So K stands for key, and you often hear this referred to as the CMYK printing process, and this is true of commercial printers or any of the desktop printers you may use. The way it works is using those four colors and creating a screen of dots. So your artwork would go through the process, and your artwork would be reduced into four screens, one for each of the four process colors. And if you look at the top, if I want to create this blue color, that's not one of the four process colors. The way I create that is I have these four screens. I've got big cyan dots, medium-sized magenta, tiny little bit of yellow, a little bit of black. Now, unless you're looking through a magnifying glass, you are not going to see these dots. But when they're combined, it would look like this through a magnifying glass. But from a distance to the human eye, this is the color you would see. Same is true with green. I'm combining the large cyan dots, large yellow, tiny bit of magenta, a little bit more of black. Through a magnifying glass, it would look like this, but from a distance, that's how the green would look. And you can see the same way with kind of the salmon colored red at the bottom as well. So again, on the left, that's what from a distance your color would look like. Through a magnifying glass, that's what the dot pattern would look like in the center. Now, the other thing with packaging, you also have to take into consideration the substrate or the material you're printing on. So when you print on cardboard or paper, you're not going to get the really clean dots like you see in the center. They're going to spread a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit imprecise like you see on the right there. So here's the way it works. If this is your artwork on the screen where it says Final CMYK, when it goes through the printing process, it goes through what we call the RIP, the raster image processing. It will take the artwork on your screen and it will reduce it down into these four screens at the printer. When the printer combines them, that will end up looking like four color or full color photographic art. If you were to look at it through a magnifying glass, this is actually what it would look like. But again, we're taking advantage of the fact that from a distance, the human eye is not going to perceive that dot pattern in there. Each of these dot patterns is laid at a very specific angle. The reason it's done that way is so the dot patterns don't clash with each other. And if you do get one of these screens off a little bit, what ends up happening, you get what we call a moire pattern. So here's what this artwork should look like when everything's aligned properly. And here you can see what happens when one or more of the screens is just slightly off. You start getting this very mottled kind of splotchy pattern that goes throughout. Now, you as a designer don't usually have to worry about that. That's something on the printer's end, but it's important for you to understand how that happens. And so if you do see it crop up in a job, you'll understand why it happened. Here is the bane of your existence as a designer. And this is what causes a lot of heartache for a lot of graphic designers. And this gets at the heart of a lot of the limitations we have with traditional printing. The large wing shape that you see in the background here, that is the full color gamut that the human eye can see. That's the pure hue. That's not talking about light tints or dark shades. Those are the pure hues, and you can see that large wing shape. That's the full range of human that humans can see in the color spectrum. Now, if you look at the other shapes that fall within that, there's the triangle shape. That is the shape that represents the colors that can be accurately reproduced on a standard computer monitor in RGB. And you'll notice it's not nearly the same range as the full range of the human eye. And then even smaller still, you can see the weird kind of trapezoid shape. Those are the range of colors that can accurately be reproduced in CMYK printing. And so what happens a lot of times is you'll design something on your monitor here, and it can't be printed accurately with the printer, or what you see with your human eye can't be reproduced on the monitor or in printing. And so there's some areas that are harder than others to reproduce in CMYK printing. The two biggest problem spots are pastel colors. CMY printing, there you can see, here's what this would look like on your monitor, and then you go to print it out. And oftentimes a good rule of thumb is with CMYK printing, the color is always going to look a little darker. It's always going to look a little dingier or dirtier than it does on your monitor. Those are just some of the realities we have to deal with. There are things you can do in your original artwork to try and compensate for that. But as a general rule of thumb, anytime you're dealing with pastel colors, those tend to be a little problematic. Also, colors that are kind of desaturated, like a lot of earth tones, those can start looking a little muddy and a little dirty as well. So if you understand that going in, you can save yourself a lot of heartache down the line. In the Adobe software, there's a lot of different color tools that you're going to be able to use. And I just want to show you, this is the color picker. You'll see it in Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. The way it works here, and just so you understand, here is the full range of the color spectrum, the solid hue. As you move the slider down, it's going to change the hue. Then you will get this wide range of color back here, from pure white up here down to what we call a rich black down here. And you can see pure color in the upper right hand corner, and then all these colors in between. As you move the color picker around here, you're going to see all these numbers over here change. And I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing here, this is the color where you start. So in this case, when I clicked on the color picker, it was white, and now I'm selecting this color. It will tell you where you're starting and where you're going to. Then when we come down here, as you move the color picker around here, you're going to see all these color numbers change. Here are your RGB additive color values. So every color is going to have a red, green, and blue value. You can see those move around. If you are designing something for a digital space, if you're designing a website or an app or something, and it's never going to be printed, it's always going to be living on a screen, then you would probably be using your RGB values in here. Also, as you move it around, you're going to see the CMYK values change here as well. So if you're designing something that you know is going to print, these would be the values you would look to. The last one down here I'll point out is the hexadecimal number. If you are writing computer code, obviously everything that appears on the web or anything that appears in app has to be reduced down to computer code. So every color that you can think of can be reduced down to the 6-digit hexadecimal number. So every color has that. So unless you're writing computer code, you're not going to really need to worry about that. The one thing I want to draw your attention to, this little warning box up here. If you choose a color that is not going to reproduce accurately in CMYK, this warning will pop up. It's called the out of gamut warning. That means the color is falling out of the CMYK color gamut. So this is just a little warning. That doesn't mean you can't use the color, but you just have to be aware that when the time comes to print it, the color might be a little off and you may need to make some adjustments on it. If you are designing for the web, you'll notice on the color picker, there's a box down here that says only web colors. When you check that, this is what's going to come up. There are only 256 colors that will absolutely be guaranteed to appear the same on all devices. And the way they have that limitation is by limiting the number of colors. So when you check on this, you'll notice instead of the smooth rainbow of hue here, you can see it's been banded into colors, and the same thing happens over here. Now, in theory, if you choose these colors, they should appear the same on every device. In practice, I've found that's not always the case, but just be aware if you are designing for the web, understanding how to work with web colors is important. Colors and printing, and talking about packaging. Now, we've talked about the 4 process colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. You can add additional colors if you want. If you have a very specific color for your brand, similar to like the Tiffany color that we mentioned in the last lecture, you can add what we call spot colors. Oftentimes they're called a 5th or a 6th or a 7th color. These are pure color inks that you can put on. They're not reproduced with a dot pattern. And especially for packaging and branding, you'll oftentimes see spot colors or Pantone colors used. Spot colors, primarily when we talk about spot colors, we're talking about Pantone colors. Pantone is a color standardization system that is used all over the world. And the reason we use it, let's say you're Target. The red that Target uses is Pantone 185. And Target has stores all over the world. And they want to make sure that all the shopping bags and the store graphics that you see here in Orange County are the exact same red that you would see in London, England, that you would see in Indonesia, that you would see in South Africa. To make sure everything and the branding is identical, most brands will select a color palette out of the Pantone system. The reason we use Pantone colors is if you look on the right here, this is a pure Pantone color. It is a solid color. If you print with it, it's called Honey Gold or Pantone 7563. If I look at this with a magnifying glass, it is going to be solid ink. There is not going to be a dot pattern with it. If I try and reproduce that color just with the standard CMYK process, this is about as close as I can get to it, and it's never going to be exactly the same color. It's never going to be as rich. And as I mentioned, most brands, they set up their color palette and they standardize it, and almost every large company has what's called a style guide. And this goes out to anyone who does business with them, saying if you are working with Walmart, you need to use Pantone 285 blue and Pantone 123 yellow. And these are the ways you can use our logo. These are the colors you can use. So almost every brand does this, so they have uniformity around the world. What Pantone also does too is they every year they release a prediction of colors they think are going to be big in the coming year. So these are the colors they've predicted for 2021, some of them. And what they do is they have people kind of scouting trends around the world. They see what colors they're seeing in emerging fashion, emerging graphic design, emerging housewares. And they put out this report to give manufacturers an idea, well, these colors are being used. I might want to use them in my products as well. This isn't the full range of colors that Pantone predicted for 2021, but from these colors, they always pick a color of the year. And for 2021, they actually did something different. They didn't choose one color, they chose two. They've only done this one other time. For 2021, they have chosen this yellow color called Pantone Illuminating and then Pantone Ultimate Gray. Why did they choose two colors for the year 2021? The theory I'm hearing through the design channels is they're trying to hedge their bets. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the COVID pandemic in the year 2021. There's vaccines out there. It's a little hopeful. People are getting a little optimistic, in which case the bright yellow color is a very nice, bright, happy, optimistic color. There are also other variations of the disease out there kind of hunting everyone, and the feeling is if things go bad, then this kind of gray color might be the color of the year. So Pantone hedging their bets for 2021. And again, they put these projections out there, and so designers can use them and say, well, these are the colors a lot of people are using. If I'm designing housewares, I know that if I design with these colors, there will be furniture that's upholstered in the same color. Or if I design women's fashion, I know that if I design a dress in this yellow, someone will be making shoes in this color as well. I mentioned branding with color, and I mentioned Tiffany in the last lecture. Most large companies do this now. They basically stake a claim to a color palette that they use throughout all their packaging, their branding, everything associated with the company. So that's kind of just an overview of working with color and also the limitations we have working with color in the 4-color printing process.